How are you guys? Hello, good afternoon. It's good to see everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to start with my favorite subject, which is Game of Thrones. So Tyrion Lannister and the Queen of Dragons, Kesha and Ryan McLemore. I had like a whole flow for this. I have to take a quick break. So I was on the plane today coming back from Brazil, and I'm like practicing this presentation. And the guy sitting next to me, my laptop is like, I'm right in the middle seat. The guy sitting next to me looks over and goes, "Is that you?" When he looked at Kesha, you ruined my entire day. So I'm like, I've got to make a change. I've done my hair. Anyway, so back to the presentation. Neil deGrasse Tyson and Carl Sagan, Uber riders and Uber drivers. What do these seemingly completely unrelated duos have in common? Guesses? Good, don't guess actually. We're better together, or they're better together. And that's what today is all about. It's talking about how you can collaborate with your product marketing manager on your team to launch more interesting, amazing global products. So since we're together for the next 20, 30 minutes, I thought it would be great to introduce myself and then hear a little bit about who you are. So my name is Kristen Brophy. I'm a senior product marketing manager at Uber, and I'm responsible for our global rider experience. And so that is really about bringing our products to global and emerging markets. But I'd love to know a little bit about who you guys are. So raise your hand if you're an engineer. Wow, okay. I thought maybe there would be a few other. What about a PM? Excellent. Product designers? Nice, represent. Anybody else that I'm missing? Call out if I didn't. Data science, developers, of course. Developer relations, another very important. This is amazing. So it kind of runs a gamut of product. I'm so excited you guys are here today. Are you guys at startups, corporations, like big multinational Uber level corporations? Cool. How many of you are on teams that have global presences all over the world? Okay, great, relevant. It's nice to meet you all again. Thank you again so much for being here and being part of this day. Before I jump into how we can collaborate as a product org and a PMM org, I thought I should tell you a little bit about what product marketing actually is at Uber. I hear a lot of people talk about marketing as a growth tool, as a way to just massively grow your customer base. And I think that that's true. But product marketing at Uber is really about partnering with the product teams to improve the customer experience by building engaging products. And so it's about a little bit more than just growing your customer base, although it can help you do that too. So behind me, we have this thing that we say on the product marketing team: know the user, know the product, connect the two. And so what you kind of see here is the PMM in the middle of a product org and a marketing org. And so our job is to truly know the user and to work with the product teams and the product functions on this side to make sure that we infuse the user needs and pain points into what we build. And so a good example of that is I work with a ton of PMs, and we partner really closely to figure out what the value prop of products are, what the roadmap is for products, and how we can make sure we're building to suit users' needs. I work with a lot of product designers to make sure that the target user and the personas are factored into what we're building and how we're building it. I'll give you a quick example. So in Latin America, personal safety, incredibly important. It's important everywhere, but specifically in Latin America and specifically in Brazil and Mexico. And so I worked on a project recently with a product designer, and I said, like, how can we make our safety features more prevalent so that when users are using Uber, they feel safer and they get peace of mind? And so we revisited those designs to make the app just seem and feel safer, which it totally is, but we needed to give ourselves more credit for that. So the second part is connecting the two, connecting the product and the user. And that's where the PMM kind of shifts in this circle and comes and focuses their attention on the marketing side. And that's where we take the product and we work with people like creative and brand to make sure that our assets are delivering the product in the right way, where we work with the CRM team to make sure we have great email campaigns that position the product appropriately, where we worked with comms and PR to make sure that we're getting our value proposition and our position for the products that we're building out into the market in the right way. And the one team I forgot to mention, because I know we have some data scientists and researchers in the room, PMMs rely so heavily on these teams and these functions, because those qualitative and quantitative inputs are what gives the users that we're building for the texture and the information that we need to make sure we truly understand them. So how do we bring this collaboration model into life? Well, this is our product development cycle. And so as you can see, it's 3 stages. The first is understand, the second is build, and the third is launch. And so during the understand phase, it's truly an inbound process. We're taking all of these insights we get qualitatively and quantitatively, synthesizing them and turning them into insights that help us decide who we are building for and what we're building. That helps us go into phase 2, which is the build phase. And we can truly say, how do we build this for our target user? And how do we bring it to market? So while the product designers and the PMs are thinking about how we build this product in an excellent way, your PMM in the background is thinking, how do I sell this thing? And is the value prop of the product or feature that we're building strong enough to bring to market? And I've actually had relationships with PMs, one in the back of the room, where we've said, this value proposition could be stronger. Let's actually go back to phase 2, figure out how we can rebuild this to make the product an even stronger value proposition and easier to bring to market. And I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like later in the presentation. And then the last phase is launch. And this is where your PMM can really shine, but will rely really heavily on the people in this room's support. This is when they're thinking about how your product or feature will grow the impact to the business. And this is when the product gets presented to the world. So I thought, what a better way to take these product and collaboration models and processes to life than to talk about a case study that I recently worked on. So Request for a Guest is a feature that we launched about a year ago in emerging markets. And I'll give you one guess on what it does. It's a very straightforward name, but basically you are requesting a ride on behalf of somebody else. That's what the feature is. So phase 1, I want to talk about the way we developed this product in the context of our product development cycle. So what did we do from an understanding phase? Well, first, we have a ton of market researchers at Uber. And one of the insights that they gave to the product team was that LATAM and India are both collectivist societies, which means they're family first, and they place the most importance in their lives on their family. And so in user testing in India in this session, we kept hearing people say like, oh, I got my mom an Uber the other day, or I got my aunt an Uber the other day. And we're like, what? You're calling rides on behalf of other people? That's so interesting. Our app isn't really built for that. It's built for a one-to-one connection. I'm calling myself an Uber. And so in user testing, we heard that people were calling rides on behalf of other people all the time. And we thought, wow. So we heard a need, basically. The second thing we heard is, yeah, it's a pain in the ass. It's really hard to call a ride for somebody else. I have to call the driver, and then I have to call my mom, who I just requested for, and say, look for this white car. And then I call the driver, look for this old lady standing on the corner. And so it just was like this thing where I was going back and forth trying to call a ride for somebody else. And it was cumbersome. So we saw the need, we heard the pain, and then we thought there could be something here. We should build for this. But is it truly an opportunity? Like, are there enough people using Uber right now where we could build something to suit this? And we looked at the data, and it turns out there was a huge need. You can see in the graph on the left, these are the number of trips that are probably requested for somebody else. That the way we measure that is if you request a ride over 2 miles away from where we think your location is using GPS, we know that it's probably for somebody else. So in India, in Indonesia, Mexico, Brazil, 10% of trips are for somebody else. That's wild. And when you look at the United States, it's 5%. And that's still high, but when we're thinking about where to focus our efforts and who to build for, emerging markets stood out to us as a no-brainer. And so that's where we started. We started with identifying the insight, looking at the need, and figuring out how to build and who to build for, which led us to our build phase. And so when we got to the build phase, we took a really iterative approach to this. And right now I'm speaking a lot about like what we as a team did. So like I said, working really closely with product designers, with the PM, to be really iterative about how we approached the design. So this was our first design here on the right. And it's what we called a triggered entry point, which meant if you were requesting a ride about 1.5 miles away from where we thought your location was, we'd pop this little card up and say like, is this for somebody else? Requested for them. What we found is like that works great if the person is coming to you. We called it the come to me use case. So if your aunt or somebody is coming from somewhere else and you want to bring them to your dinner party or your whatever, you can request for them. When we took that to concept testing, what it didn't account for is if somebody was sitting right next to you. So you brought your aunt to your home, you had dinner, Now, how do you send her home with a model like this? You can't. So that's when we went into the second phase of design, which was building it right into the request flow. So this is a request. You guys, hopefully you've all used Uber, but this is the current request flow. And what we did, we just added a little profile switch right in the existing request flow, which meant we could account for the come to me use case and the second use case, which we called the kiss and go use case. So send them back home, please. When they've overstayed their welcome. And so that way we accounted for both use cases, but we also made it a lot easier for the user because this is something that was intuitive. It's something people already knew how to do within the Uber app. That being said, we looked at, when we came up with this new request flow, like I said earlier, we actually didn't know if the value prop was strong enough to use it because we didn't account for the fact that that real pain was in the coordination between the driver and the guest rider. So we developed a text message cadence flow. Right when the requester, so the person requesting a ride for somebody else, requested it, their guest got a text message and it got all the important card details that we found out somebody needs to coordinate their own trip. So we gave the power to the guest to coordinate their own trip and we disintermediated the person who was requesting the trip. So you got things like the driver's contact information. You got a map where you could follow the driver and see where he was towards your destination. You got his license plate number. And so these were really important things that the guests needed to coordinate their own ride. And on the back end, we had the person requesting able to open the Uber app and just follow the trip in their app so they could know their loved one got home safely. So once we had felt really confident about what we built and how we built it, we were ready to bring it to market. And this is where I think your PMM can really step in and define what the strategy is. So, what is our Facebook marketing strategy? What is our email strategy? How do we position this? What do we say? Who do we say it's for? And why would they use it? But it's also where we start to establish really strong connection with regional operations teams. And so because we wanted to start with launching this product in India, we had to work with our regional operations teams to understand the nuances of the city. And you may all not have this problem because you're not a transportation companies that have like city level regulations and policies and infrastructure considerations, but we certainly do. So regional counterparts are so critical for understanding these transportation nuances. And they were actually really helpful in guiding our rollout approach and defining where we could be in beta and which cities and why. And we would have never had that market texture had we not that really strong relationship with our regional counterparts. So like I said earlier, the PMM really has to know the product, know the user, and connect the two. And I think one of the main things about knowing your user is knowing your region when you're going to launch a global product. It's just such a critical piece of this. And so what we've gotten in the habit of doing is doing workshops with our regional teams. So for Request for a Guest, we hosted a workshop in India and Latin America to educate them. And I bring my PM and I bring my product designer, I bring my researcher, and we sit down with the global marketing teams and we talk to them about what the future is and what it will unlock in their region. And it's great because they get to pull and extract information that they need from a context standpoint, but we also get to learn about their market. So for example, with Request for a Guest, we knew that people wanted to request for other people, but in India, people were requesting for their older family members versus in Latin America, people were requesting for their friends who just had older devices. This is a really important insight because it changed how we marketed those features in those regions, and we never would have gotten that color had we not gotten to those regions and had those conversations. Quick aside, I also work on a product called m.uber, which is a browser-based product. I see you shaking your head. Yeah, it's amazing. If you haven't tried it, like I call Uber from my desktop all the time now, and then I just go because you can call it from your browser. But the reason we built that product is because in Latin America specifically, phones are older. They're older Samsungs, and they don't run sophisticated, heavy apps like Uber very well. And so we gave them a browser product to use and try out. And we never would have gotten that kind of context had we not gone to the market and learned about those device constraints. So kind of interesting. The second part of a great launch is what we like to say, own the narrative and own the results. And so what that really means is you can own how you position it, but you also have to own how successful that is. And it's really important to do that if you're working with global teams because, like for example, Uber regional marketing teams set their own priorities and have their own insulated budgets. So they can't just market whatever HQ tells them to market. It has to make sense for their region. And so what we did for Request for a Guest is launch in India first. And what we found is when we launched in India, 2% of trips, trips grew by 2%, which is spectacular. 50% of the guests who experienced a ride signed up, and they demonstrated a 2x better retention rate. Phenomenal results that we then packaged and brought to Mexico, Brazil, and said, like, this can help you grow your trips, but it can also help you improve your user experience. And so they were like, no brainer. And they marketed it too. And they invested in email campaigns and comms and PR. So it's so important to own your narrative and own your product, but also own how incredible the results that your product drives are. And then my final takeaway from a launch perspective is you have to playbook everything you do. And I don't know if playbook translates for all of you guys, but at Uber, we playbook everything because we have 70 offices across the world. So it's really important to make sure that everything you do is documented, but also templated to scale. So playbooking basically allows you to scale your time by giving your regions the context, information, and content that they need to tweak and scale. So I'll give you an example. Playbooks, by the way, are like a deck. It's a fancy word for saying it. It's a good marketing word. This is an example of the end of the deck that sort of like consolidates all of the content we produce at a launch. Creative templates. So if you want a region to market your product, it's a really good idea to have assets, like pre-made assets that they can just localize and tweak, so that will get their campaigns out the door way faster. It'll help them scale. Queries. The queries, having like a same templated approach to a query that you just give regions that they can tweak for their city or their country or their user base, that also allows them to scale much more quickly. PRDs, team POCs, like having all these things in a concentrated place sounds so obvious, but I can't tell you how much it's helped me scale my time. So I don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time I talk to a country office about scaling a marketing campaign. And then the last piece, and this kind of goes back to own the narrative on the results, the last piece is a dashboard. And so what we've done is we template every dashboard and we give it to regions and say, if you're going to launch a campaign with our product, please use this dashboard so that we can all track how we're contributing to our global growth as a business. And that's a really helpful way to, again, own the narrative and own the results. So I just wanted to wrap up again by saying thank you for being here today. And I also hope that each of you had a small takeaway about how you can work with your product marketing manager to make sure that the products and features that you're building don't sit on a shelf and they get into the hands of users. And on Monday, you can sort of like go back into the office and say, we're going to be like the next Neil deGrasse Tyson and Carl Sagan duo, because we're such good partners now. From this, I knew that joke wasn't going to land. So that's okay. I didn't have a good wrap-up idea. Anyway, I hope you guys get into the office on tomorrow, is Friday or Monday, and you have a new sense of how to partner with your PMM. Thank you so much.